Alrighty, Math 3, this is the preview for the quiz that is coming right up. So here you have an example of some terms that we want to multiply. And so the instructions are to simplify. If the pen would, great. And so I think the best way for us to do this is to make the box. And so some of you guys really like the box. And so basically what you do is you put the individual terms of each bracket spot on the box. So the first two terms are x and -3. And yes, the minus belongs to the 3 and not the x. So make sure you put that negative with the 3. And then up top, we have 4x squared. Then we have -3x. Then we have 2. And so what we do now is we just multiply for each box. So we have 4x squared times x, which is 4x cubed. And then down below, we have -12x squared. -12x squared, because 4 times -3 is -12. So the numbers multiply, but the variable with the exponent does not. And then up top here, -3x times x, that is -3x squared, because remember, x to the 1 times x to the 1 is 1 plus, you add the exponents, so 1 plus 1 becomes 2. If you remember the exponent video I just did, that's what you get, -3x squared. -3 times -3x, when you multiply the constants, coefficient there, -3 times -3 is +9. And so you still have the x, so we get 9x. And then up top here, 2 times x is 2x. And then down below, -6. And then we combine like terms, if there are any. Do any of these have the same variable with the same exponent? And I say yes. This one and this one have the same exponent. And then the other two over here, 9x and 2x, also have the same. So this means that this is 4x cubed. And then we'll add the green ones together. -12x squared minus 3x squared, that's -15x squared. And I'm running out of room there, so I gotta go down below. 9x plus 2x is 11x plus 11x. And finally, -6. There's nothing else to do to simplify. You cannot combine terms that have different exponents. So this is it. This is my answer right here. This thing right here. This is my answer to the first one. All right, next up. And these are all problems that are very similar to the ones on the quiz. So we have here this, and we're supposed to solve for x. Okay, so what do we do? Well, I purposely did one that's a little weird so that we have to use the quadratic formula. So that's what we're going to do. But first, before you can do that, you have to have it equal 0, because otherwise you cannot use the quadratic formula. So we actually have to get this 2 over to the left because it needs to equal 0. And so what we get then is we have 4x squared plus 16x plus 7 equals 0. Trying to make my plus look a little more like a plus. Yeah. Anyway, so once you have that, now we know our A, B, and C. So our A equals 4. Right? That's the first value. Our B equals 16. And our C equals 7. Somehow I avoided negative numbers. I will consider myself lucky and hope everything works out well. So to plug it into the quadratic formula, well, what is the quadratic formula? Well, that is minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, let's plug it in. So minus b, that would be minus 16 plus or minus the square root of 16 squared minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is 7, all over 2a. 2 times 4. What do we get? Well, let's keep going. So this is minus 16 plus or minus the square root of 16 squared is 256. Minus 4 times 4 times 7. That would be 28 times 4, which is 80 plus 32, which is 112. 1, 1, 2. And that goes all over 8. So what is that? Let me use a different color so we don't get confused. That is minus 16 plus or minus the square root of 256 minus 112 is 144. Wow. All over 8. Look at that. So that is minus 16. And if you know your multiplication table, well, if you know your squares up to 12, then you know that the square root of 144 is 12 over 8. And so that means that if it were minus 16 plus 12, it would be minus 4 over 8. So let me do two different ones. Minus 4 over 8. And that is the plus one. Remember, it's plus or minus. So if it's the plus, it would be minus 16 plus 12, which is minus 4 over 8. And if it were negative, if this were the minus 16 minus 12 is negative 28. So that'd be minus 28 over 8. I can fit that 8 down there. Doesn't look like I can. It kind of looks like an 8. I'll just make a note of that. And so this becomes, if you do it out, divide top and bottom by 4, you get negative 7 over 2. And so this is negative 3.5. And this top one here is negative a half. Yes, that was a long walk in the park. But the one on the test is just as bad. So I would really look at this problem closely. Maybe try doing it on your own first. Should have said that before. But yeah, so the solutions are negative a half and negative 3.5 or 3.5. I could have done decimals for both or fractions for both. Moving on. So the next one is just for you to simplify. So again, try this on your own first, see if you can do it. What do you get? Well, remember that there's a hidden 1. If you just have x, that means it's actually x to the 1. And so what you can do is you can take all of the constants, all of the coefficients, and group them together. Because remember, in multiplication, you can rearrange them any way you want. And then the x's, you have x cubed times x squared times x to the 1, if this is all right. And so those x's, the exponents get added up. 2 times 4 times 5 is 40. And x, let me just be really thorough, just to show you guys how this works. 3 plus 2 plus 1, which is 40 times x to the 6th power. And that is how you simplify that one. 2 more. Once again, we have to simplify. And by the way, this is multiplication here in the middle. It's not a minus. I'm trying to times this. So the first thing, what makes this a little hard is we have the negative exponent. And so we have to do that, and we have to deal with that one. So let's see how we can do that. So first of all, remember that when you have a bracketed exponent like that, with the 3 and the negative 2, the rule from the exponent rules is that you have to multiply those. So it actually is 3 times negative 2. So I will do that first. So I'm going to leave the first part alone and just copy it over and not make any changes. And I'm just going to deal with, and it's always good to not do too much at once, because then otherwise you get confused. And so this then in the bracket there, I'll leave the bracket too. This would be x times 3. I'm sorry, x to the 3 times negative 2. And if I were a real stickler, I should actually bracket that minus 2. But sometimes in my shorthand, I'm like, I know that's minus. It's not subtracting the 2. It's actually times a negative number. Okay, so again, I'm going to leave that part on the left alone until I have that bracket resolved. I always want to resolve brackets as much as I can, and before I start distributing or multiplying stuff. So 3 times 2 is 6, and there's a minus, so this is x to the minus 6 times x to the minus 6. So what is that? Well, remember that negative means inverse, so this is really 1 over x to the 6th. So I can actually write this as 3 times x to the 4. And I'll do the whole step out. This is 1 over x to the 6th. And because those are being multiplied, the x to the 4 times 1 over x to the 6, I can just put that x to the 4 and the 3 in the numerator. And so that means I have 3x to the 4th over x to the 6th. And that is 3 times x to the 4 minus 6. And so that is 3 times x to the negative 2. You can also write that as 3 over x squared. And that is your answer. Last question. Last question. One more. This one, what we have to know is we have to find the in range. So if you know what that is, try to figure it out right now. Pause the video, and then we'll see what you got. Domain and range. Okay, so remember that domain is the x value, and range is the y value. And remember that this is the x-axis, and that is the y-axis. So what are all the possible x's that you get if you made a coordinate for each dot on that curve? What would be the smallest x value and what would be the largest x value? Well, the smallest x value is the furthest on the left. How far left does it go? Well, I would say, yeah, I can draw it. I'm a little off the line, but it's the -4. Right? This point right here, I could make it appear better. That -4 right there, that is the smallest possible value for x. So x has to be equal to or larger than -4. And it goes into positive infinity. So it depends on how they want the answer. So sometimes they want the answer like in a set. And so you have the little set brackets. And, but I looked at the quiz and they don't want anything like that. So I'm not going to confuse you with that. So our answer would just be x has to be equal to or greater than -4, because on the positive side, there's no limit. This line goes into infinity. This line right here just going. It doesn't end. All right, so let's talk about the range. So what are the possible y values of this graph? Well, the smallest possible value is right here. And for the y, that is the smallest y, right? There is no coordinate that's something comma -4, because that would be down here somewhere. And there's nothing down there. So it has to be larger than -2, meaning it is -2 and up. There's no dots down here. Okay, so the range has to be greater than -2. So y must be equal to or greater than -2. And that little line underneath the greater than lesser sign means or equal to. And so that's it. Hopefully you do well on the quiz. The questions are very similar to this. Good luck.